Alright, so if you're running Icewind Dale, Rime of the Frostmaiden, you may be thinking to yourself, what the hell is the deal with the Arcane Brotherhood? And what are they doing and why are they acting so strangely and apparently against their own interests and fighting amongst each other? First and foremost, let's just quickly give an overview of the Arcane Brotherhood's role in Icewind Dale, Rime of the Frostmaiden. As you probably know, the Arcane Brotherhood has sent these 4 agents, Belin, Araris, Desan, and Nas Lantomir, to Icewind Dale, and they are supposed to be there to help uncover Ithrin, find these arcane treasures and ancient artifacts that the Arcane Brotherhood have heard about. But they don't seem to be working together, which is what has a lot of people sort of confused. Why is this entity sending agents that are then trying to kill each other? Which is, of course, why we're going to delve into what the Arcane Brotherhood is. It is, as the name suggests, a brotherhood of arcanists, so that's wizards basically, that have come together to drive towards common purposes. It was founded some 200 years before the history of, or the story that we get in Icewind Dale, Rime of the Frostmaiden, which is supposed to take place in the 1490s, early 90s, and the Arcane Brotherhood was founded way back in 1310-11 or some such. The Brotherhood was founded in Luskan, which is the northernmost big city of the Sword Coast. So you have this coastal city ran by captains or pirate captains for some periods of time. The Arcane Brotherhood comes in and they take over the city and begin to wield the actual power of the city for the better part of a century at least, before they are ousted. In the later part of the 14th century, the Arcane Brotherhood is sort of dissolved. We don't hear about it anymore. And then a whole 100 years later, in 1486, so that's like a handful of years before the events of Icewind Dale around Frostmaiden, the Arcane Brotherhood gets a resurgence. It becomes a power player in Luskan again, and it begins sending its agents, such as it's doing it in Icewind Dale, Rime of Frostmaiden, to various places in the world to gather arcane power and sort of concert or enforce the Arcane Brotherhood's will in those areas. For me personally, I'd compare the Arcane Brotherhood to, let's say, a really cutthroat investment bank where we have individualists that are part of a greater whole, but are still mostly in it for themselves when it comes down to it. And like these types of organizations, you have some people on the top who will want to recruit lesser people or foot soldiers or new fighters or new investment bankers or sellers, and they want to empower these sellers to go out and make more money for them. In the case of the Arcane Brotherhood, it's not necessarily money as much as it is arcane power and law and ancient artifacts and what have you. The point here is that you have to get new blood coming in, you have to get these people in, but you're not necessarily as an organization really that interested in the individual, whereas the individual is really only interested in themselves. And that's something we get a really good example of in the book where I got my first impression of the Arcane Brotherhood, which is in The Crystal Shard, which is by R.A. Salvatore and was written, or at least published, way back in the late 80s. Now in this book, which is of course also hugely influential for the adventure Icewind Dale, Rime of the Frostmaiden, because it takes place in Icewind Dale and it sort of involves a lot of the things you will later see references to in Rime of the Frostmaiden. But anyway, in this book, it sort of starts off with the Arcane Brotherhood having sent a delegation to Icewind Dale, much like they're doing in the adventure actually. And as a part of this expedition, you get some scenes where we have a apprentice wizard. He is an apprentice to a more senior wizard, but the senior wizard's colleagues, the other senior wizards that are part of this expedition, are sort of niggling at the apprentice, trying to get him to betray his master, kill him, so that they will elevate him to his place and he will become a senior wizard. And this lowly apprentice believes them, kills his master, stabs him, and is quite unceremoniously left to die in the snow by these senior wizards. And I think that is a great example of how things work in the Arcane Brotherhood, where everyone as individualists are not really into taking risks and openly attacking each other, and that would also be against the Arcane Brotherhood's bylaws, so to speak. But there's not really going to be an investigation if someone dies, as long as you have a scapegoat and as long as you can pin it on someone else, or you can make sure that there's no witnesses and you can make sure that you are not at risk for doing it. Then these wizards in the Arcane Brotherhood are perfectly happy to get rid of one another if they stand in the way of power. If someone is wielding power over them and they want to take their place, well, they'll find or try to find some way to destroy each other. And that's also what we see in Rime the Frostmaiden, where you have these 4 equals, maybe. At least it makes it seem like they're pretty equal in the Arcane Brotherhood standing, but they're still fighting amongst each other. You have Naslantomir, who steals Velin's orb, Professor Scant, before going to Icewind Dale. She winds up dead, so it doesn't really work out for her. Likewise, we also have Avarice and Velin sort of competing to find Ithring in the later stage of the adventure, where you'll also have Avarice sort of, if the characters are with Velin, try to convince them to go with her instead and try to kill Velin, especially or particularly if she can. And that's because she knows deep down in the depths of Ithrin, no one is gonna know or care if Velin died along the way, if she comes back with a ton of arcane treasures for her masters and maybe a few choice pieces she can keep for herself and never show to the higher ups in the Arcane Brotherhood. So that's also the way that we've played the Arcane Brotherhood in our games, where we have these really individuals that are beholden to a greater good because they get resources from the Arcane Brotherhood. They get shared knowledge from the Arcane Brotherhood. The higher ups might give them magic items or give them information they can act upon, and they are then expected to bring back arcane lore, bring back treasures, bring back information. So it's sort of this information sharing deal, but we're still playing these characters as if they are at their heart individualist. And that can be a bit hard to convey in your Rime of the Frostmaiden game, but if you can make it work, I'd say it's really worth it, because they are some quite interesting characters when you get down to it. And I think that the dynamic between Velin and Avarice is particularly fun and entertaining, because you really have these two people that really dislike each other, and the characters will perhaps get the opportunity to choose between them and choose the sort of path they want to go down. That's at least the way we've written it up in our guide to, or our DM's resources for Icewind Dale Rime of the Frostmaiden. And yeah, beyond that, there's not a whole lot left to say, except thank you so much for watching, thank you for being a subscriber, and I hope that I'll see you in the next video.